When I joined ASADA 6 years ago, it was primarily anti-doping, and then 2021 it became Sport Integrity Australia, and effectively we were the first to do it this way. And now other countries are coming to Sport Integrity Australia saying, listen, can you give us some guidance? Yeah, a lot of it is predicting, but the here and now is also very important. So I find that what I do is assess it, work out whether or not it's going to be important to us now in the future, and put it into an assessment, and then I'll do an analysis. Obviously, we're looking to have integrity embedded in sport right across Australia. And that includes the agencies we work at, just to get them understanding about what we do. I think it's all about relationships, to tell you the truth. I know that's a very simple way of putting it, but a lot of people in government comms don't have experience in newsrooms, in media. You have a relationship in terms of being able to ring up any time, have an element of trust.
Welcome to the GovComms Podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello everyone, and welcome to GovComms, a podcast about the practice of communication and engagement in government and the public sector. My name is David Pembroke. Thanks for joining me once again. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we are podcasting today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and indeed pay my respects to the elders of all the lands from where anyone is listening to this podcast today. Now, I am in a bit of a habit at the moment of declaring an interest ahead of podcasts, because sometimes it does seem like I am just interviewing my friends. But perhaps having been in the game for 30 years, it is likely that I do have a number of friends who are the top professionals in the business. And Tim Gavel is one such expert, and we have worked together and known each other for a very long time. Now, Tim's career in media and broadcasting began as a midnight to dawn disc jockey, spinning discs and taking requests on a radio station in far Western Queensland. But he didn't stay there for long, made his way through the regions into the capital cities, and finally settled in Canberra over 35 years ago, where he made his name as one of Australia's best sports broadcasters. Now, Tim has been to many Olympic Games, called many grand finals, and it doesn't really matter what type of sport, be it rugby league, rugby union, football, basketball. He made a specialty of calling rowing at the Olympics, but he is a deeply experienced commentator. But not only that, a very good journalist. In his time at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Tim worked 7 days a week, not only at the weekends commentating, but making sure that every day he was bringing the latest sports news from around the world and across Australia to the people not only of Canberra, but indeed across the ABC network. But he joins me in the studio because Tim is no longer working as a full-time member of the staff at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and he's jumped across into the Australian Public Service, where he is now working as the Media Director for Sports Integrity Australia. And what I am really looking forward today is a discussion about not just his role and what he knew and learnt in media, but how it applies to his job as managing a very, very big and busy part, an issue, I should say, inside the Australian federal bureaucracy. So he joins me now. Tim Gavel, welcome to GovComms.
Thank you, David. Lovely intro.
Tim, Tyler's Tim was what we used to call you back in the day, because you worked so hard in the sports broadcasting world. But from what I understand, from what you've told me, your work in the public service is just as busy.
I think well, you can make it as busy as you like, I think. And I grew up on a farm where, as you know, it's 7 days a week working on a farm. The other thing too is that I felt that I was deficient as a broadcaster, so I tried to make up for it by working harder than anybody else, and it's sort of stuck with me. I just find it very hard not to work hard. And I guess in the public service, you know, it's what you make it. And I really enjoy what I do at Sport Integrity Australia. It's a dynamic industry, it's a dynamic business, and It's a place I really enjoy working at and working for.
It's what we call an issues-rich environment, isn't it? Sports Integrity Australia, because it's looking at everything from and both the professional and the community sports aspects, but it's drugs, it's sexual abuse, it's integrity, it's sports betting, it's a myriad of other things. So, have you been surprised at how many issues there are that you're having to deal with as part of your role at Sports Integrity Australia?
When I joined ASADA 6 years ago, it was primarily anti-doping, and then to 2021 it became Sport Integrity Australia, and you are exposed to a lot more issues, a wider range of issues in sport. And yes, it did surprise me because I think before Sport Integrity Australia, a lot of it was left unsaid, and now it's very much at the forefront. People are talking about it, which is good news, and they're talking about issues that need to come to the surface so that people are aware of them, but also so that people, if they have issues, they can now find a place to report or a mechanism to report them to. And that's why I think it's very important the role that sport integrity plays in Australian sport. But yes, I am surprised by the myriad of issues. It's not just one or two issues, but it's a constant every day. There are issues of racial abuse, sexual abuse in sport, problems with gambling, online gambling, and then you have a look at anti-doping. There are so many issues in sport, you'd be surprised. If you took a forensic look at what we do every day, you'd be blown away.
So, but it's an interesting point, that one, isn't it? That it was the Australian Sports Anti-Doping Agency morphed into Sports Integrity Australia, but it wasn't like there was the opportunity to stop and say, oh, okay, well, this is how we're going to go about it. You led, as under the leadership of David Sharp, have really had to build the aeroplane as it's taking off. You didn't have the time to stop and reflect and wait because these issues started to come in the door before you were. So it's observing it from the outside has been. I've enjoyed watching the way that the organisation has matured under such pressure, because you haven't really had time to sort of stop because you're just so busy every day dealing with these issues.
He's a very dynamic leader, David Sharp. Having worked with a number of people in leadership positions over the years, he is probably the most dynamic leader I've ever worked for. And so he was the one that was very much at the forefront driving it and making sure that we got everything right as we were going. Of course, you make mistakes as you're going because there was no footprint about, oh, listen, another country's doing it or somebody else is doing it. Effectively, we were the first to do it this way. And now other countries are coming to Sport Integrity Australia saying, listen, can you give us some guidance? So it was very interesting, very, I guess, on the seat of your pants. You're really working it out as you went along. And as I say, not everything is perfect to start off with, but as you move along and you get feedback from stakeholders such as national sporting organisations, you start working out, what works and what doesn't work.
Okay, so let's go through it for the audience, just to get a bit of an understanding of the role that you play. What time of the day do you start? What are the things that you're doing? How does it work? How this role as media director at Sports Integrity Australia?
So as the sports advisor there, I essentially go through all of the media overnight, early in the morning. So I'm up early.
What time?
Oh, listen, I'm probably awake by 5, before 5. And I work at night just to make sure that any breaking stories at night, and then get up early. And essentially I do an assessment of my own. I know that there are media companies out there that provide it, but sometimes the nuances are something that only we can pick up as humans, as opposed to AI.
And experienced people as well, like yourself, who've been looking at this stuff for
it's essentially
40 years.
That's what I've been doing all my life, is picking the bones out of stories and working out whether or not that might be something that might
matters or doesn't matter,
might affect us in the future. So, a lot of it is predicting, but the here and now is also very important. So I find that what I do is assess it, work out whether or not it's going to be important to us now in the future, and put it into an assessment, and then I'll do an analysis, and that's the start of my day. And then I go into work And
so with that analysis, though, when that's done,
Yep.
do you send that off to Sharpie and the executive team with
so
some notes? So by the time you get to work,
Yep. It's basically a guidance, I think, to listen. This is what the media are looking at. It's not just Australian media either. I look at overseas media because what we find is sometimes things that happen overseas, for instance, athlete A, gymnastics abuse, while it mightn't be a thing in Australia at the time, you can forecast that, listen, this is going to hit us, because what we've found is that once there are stories in the media, whether it be online or mainstream media, we find that it triggers a response, and people say, well, listen, gee, that happened to me, and suddenly you've got a movement. And that's where I think that it's important that Australia takes note of what's happening overseas, and that's where I come into the picture a little bit here, is that I look at overseas media, whether it be the BBC or US media, and work out whether or not, just have a look at this, because I think that it may impact on us in the future.
And do you have like a traffic light signal of sort of red, amber, green?
Yep.
Do you know, red alert, let's
I do.
all...
Yeah,
Okay.
like I'd only alert the exec after hours if I felt as though, listen, this is something that we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
There are plenty of red alerts, let me tell you. You see something at 9 o'clock at night and you think, okay, I probably need to let everybody know.
So I know it's hard to say, but in a typical week, how many times would you think that, there's not a crisis, but there is something that you need to react to? Is it once a week, twice a week, once a fortnight?
Oh, no, it'd be a couple of times a week.
Okay.
Yeah, and because it is such a dynamic agency and you're across so many different issues, far more than simply anti-doping, you see something like racial abuse, for instance, Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker, racial abuse in rugby league by fans. Okay, so education is very important to make people aware that it's wrong. But also, you look at anti-doping, the use of supplements, etc. You might see a story about supplement use. And so that's not necessarily a red alert, but what we do, you put it in the media, alerts just to say, listen, this is something that's happening. But
Okay.
there are varying levels of sort of urgency, I think it's fair to say, when it comes to analysing the media.
Okay, so you've shot off the email with the analysis, you've had your shower, you've arrived at work, you're good to go. What happens then?
There are a number of meetings. It's not just the media advice that I provide, but also involved in various meetings within the agency on a daily basis. And it's important, I think, to be aware of what everybody is doing within the agency, because sometimes you think, well, they're doing that and somebody else is doing that. It could end up that it might end up in the media, or we may be addressing something ahead of time that may end up being a media issue. So I think it's important to know what everybody's doing within the agency, and you can only do that, I think, by face-to-face. I know that a lot of people working from home, etc., and that's well and good, but I do like to have the interface and the...
Yeah, but it's relationships, isn't it?
I like
it's
to have the
personal
relationship.
it's human relationships, and and again, you can get to know their business.
That's right.
And
their personalities.
And they'll also come to you.
Yep.
If they think, oh, this might be something that is the interest of Tim.
But if you're out of sight, out of mind, sometimes you don't get involved in the conversation.
That's a much bigger topic for another time, particularly in the media and communication space. I simply don't understand how you can do that job working from home.
No, that's right.
I do not see how it can work that way. But anyway,
I feel as though I need to be in the office every day.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been through your meetings, and what's happening then? Are you on the phone talking to journos, ringing up the different people, talking to the minister's office, for example?
Yeah. So a lot of phone calls every day, and I do get a lot of phone calls from journos wanting backgrounders on various issues. I guess having been in the media and worked alongside most of the leading journos for many years I did 7 Olympics, 7 Commonwealth Games, amongst other sporting events. But because I have been involved with these people over the years, they'll ring up and there's an element of trust there, and they'll say, oh, listen, can you tell us this? And I'll say, well, no, I really can't say too much on that. And they say, oh, that's fair enough, we understand, because they know that if I can tell them, I will. And having worked...
And when you can tell them you will.
Yeah, that's right. And having worked with them over the years and not be afraid to sort of pick up the phone and have a chat to them if I feel as though something's a bit off topic in the story they've done that might impact on us. Say, listen, I don't mind if you give us a whack if we deserve it, but just so long as we're in the conversation with our point of view. And I'm quite upfront with that. I think that transparency with journalists is so important, also to have a relationship with journalists. If you're going to be a media advisor, you need to be very personable, and you need to not be afraid to answer everybody who rings, pick the phone up and say, yep, what's the issue?
So that's an interesting point. So everybody, anyone who gives you a call, you call them back.
That's right, or I'll answer straight away. Sometimes when you're getting a lot of calls and we've got a major issue happening, you might get 30 calls in an hour.
Yeah.
And often you'll get 5 calls from the one news agency. So SMH, Age, ABC, Channel 9 or whatever. Yeah, you might get... Yeah. And so sometimes you don't get back to all of them within that time period, like the next hour or so. And you'll try and get back to them later on. If you've answered 4 calls, for instance, from one agency, and you know that you've got a stack of calls to return from, say, News Limited or News Corp or ABC, and you haven't answered their calls because you've been busy answering calls from the SMH and H, sometimes you might miss out on the 5th, but get back to them when you can.
Yeah. How useful do you think your deep and long experience in the sports media has been in the role that you're playing now?
We'd like to think it is playing a role. Probably not for me to say, but you'd like to think that because you've worked alongside them, they know you. There's an element of trust there on both sides, and I'd like to think that it is important because of that relationship and the fact that they know that I'll pick up the phone if I'm available to, and if I can answer their questions, I will at any time of the day.
Yeah.
So I think there is that personable touch, because I do think that sometimes in the public service there is a feeling that you can bash a public service agency if you don't know who the people are within the agency. So what I did when I first joined Sport Integrity Australia, or way back 6 years ago, Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority, what I did is I brought in every journalist that was in our space, whether it be somebody who'd been quite combative towards ASADA over the years, people who are very much interested in what we do. I brought them all into the agency one by one.
In person,
to meet the people at the agency, to put a human face on it and just say, listen, this is who we are. Everybody is trying their damn best to protect the integrity of sport in Australia. Sure, we'll make mistakes and we deserve to get a whack if we do make a mistake, but we are people, we're doing our best. And there are a lot of people here who have been involved in sport over the years, trying to make sure that the integrity of sport is protected in Australia. So that's what we've done.
And it worked?
Well, I think so. I think that
it does work. It works.
Well,
it works. It's much easier once you know somebody. It's much harder to give them a whack when you know who they are and where they're from and what they're doing.
But more than that, it provides an education to the journos. Listen, when there's a major anti-doping story happening, we can't comment, and just to make them aware of why we can't comment because of privacy restrictions, amongst other things, or there might be an investigation going on. You don't hear the police talking about their investigations all the time. Sometimes we can't talk about issues that we're investigating. We'll do our best to provide as much direction as possible. And what we've done is we've beefed up our website so that if somebody rings up and says, what's the process? I said, well, I can't talk about the process specifically relating to this case, but what I can do is direct you towards information on our website. So we've made sure that every time there is a case that we're involved in, we learn from it. We learn what people are looking for, what journalists want. And then after it, I'll often have a debrief with journalists to find out, where they went and how they handled things.
So that's an interesting insight, that there is a lessons learned process that you have through each of these major issues, because they're all different.
Yeah.
They move differently. They have got different modes of impact, probably in different channels at different times in different parts of Australia. So just if you can give me a little bit more detail about that lessons learned process. How do you assemble the insights to then strengthen your processes?
Well, I'll give you an example. So there's a major anti-doping case, and probably 6 years ago we'd put out 2 lines saying Sport Integrity Australia can't comment on this issue. Now I think that we will try and work with the sport and the athlete to provide more information about timeframes, about more about the case itself if we can. So what we try and do is every time we do it, we think, oh, gee, we probably could have provided more information to journalists than we did. We, understandably, we take a cautious approach because privacy needs to be protected. But there are times when you think, oh, we probably could have gone further in this area, or in terms of informing who, when, what, why, how. You do learn lessons from it. And often information on our website, you think, well, we probably need to have something on our website, whether it be a blog or something, just so that journalists have got a greater understanding of A, the particular drug that is in question, but B, the process. We try and make sure that there is that information on the website in a simple to read form.
So in a given day, what's the percentage that you're talking to the media of your time, as opposed to working with your colleagues or working to Sharpie and the executive?
Probably 10 calls a day, which is quite a high number.
And they're not just quick calls, are they? You're, again, trying to understand who they are, where they're from, what they're looking for.
There are a lot of people in our space, not just in Australia, but globally. We get a lot of questions from international media about cases, about things we're doing. And I find that, you'll get calls from media asking questions about something. It might be a quick call. Are you involved in this? And I'll be able to triage it and say, no, that's not something we'd look at. But there are other things, they're a little more in depth, and you have to get some more information from the various experts within Sport Integrity Australia. But so there's probably about 10, and often I'll give journalists a call just to find out where they're up to on stories that they may be working on, where they've made a request about a month ago or something like that, and they say, oh, we're working on this story, we'll get back to you. You haven't heard back from them, so often you'll ring up and say, listen, how are you going with that one? Where you're up to? And I think it's important just to stay in constant communication with journalists, because the journalists play a very important role in our space to get the right information out, to make sure that the processes are fully understand about what we do, and the education models that we've got at Sport Integrity Australia are world-leading, world-class. And it's important to promote what we do within the agency as well.
So obviously the Minister's Office is a key stakeholder in our system of government. Describe that relationship. And I know that the Sport Minister in Australia, her press secretary is, Chris Garry, very experienced sports journalist. That must be useful as well, because he's one of the tribe.
He's been great, actually, Chris, and I speak to him a lot. He's very understanding about what we do, but also about the requirements of the media. And I think it's important to have that relationship between the agency and also the Minister's Office. But he's been very, very good for us. Good for me in that he's been able to guide me through things. I've been able to help him. But you work as a team, and you work out.
And what sort of requests do they normally ask of you? And again, is it that sort of?
Well, it might
just
be.
Let us know what's going on. Tell us what's going on. Where are things up to?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. But there might be an issue in the media that's popped up, quite a prominent story, and I'll give them a call, or they might give me a call, and we'll go through it, where it's up to, and what might be the response to it from both the government point of view and sport integrity point of view. I think it's important that we do respond to major issues, as opposed to sort of saying, listen, we're not going to make any comment. I think it's important that there is some offering there from from both sides.
So also, not only the Minister is clearly a key stakeholder, but Sports Integrity Australia sits as part of, inside the bureaucracy, part of an ecosystem. You have
Department of Health.
Department of Health's policy area out there being run by Travis Haslam, an experienced administrator and bureaucrat. You've then obviously got the Sports Commission and their role in the ecosystem. So how do you work together collaboratively to to deliver a better service to the Minister and through the Minister and the government to the people of Australia?
Obviously, we're looking to have integrity embedded in sport right across Australia, and that includes the agencies we work at, just to get them understanding about what we do and the importance of national sporting organisations to have integrity embedded into their framework, into their psyche almost. So that's our role, is to ensure that everybody is understanding of their responsibilities. We provide guidance from a governance point of view, but also from a practical sense. So what we do is essentially make sure that everybody is aware of the importance of integrity in sport. So, for instance, you've got the Sports Commission, who govern 96 or 97 national sporting organisations. So they play a very important role in making sure that those NSOs understand the importance of integrity in sport. But we've also got the National Integrity Framework, which has been adopted by the majority of sports in Australia, which provides guidance on integrity issues, how to make complaints, how to handle complaints, etc. So I think it's really important that everybody is working together. It's not just the Sports Commission, the department. Like, you've got the National Sports Tribunal also plays an important role in the Australian sporting ecosystem, and Sport Integrity Australia.
So the audience for this podcast is people who generally work in government and government communications. And obviously, as an experienced journalist, sports broadcaster, now working in the APS, what advice do you have to people working in those government communication functions around media and media engagement?
I think it's all about relationships, to tell you the truth. I know that's a very simple way of putting it, but a lot of people in government comms don't have experience in newsrooms, in media organisations, so they don't really understand the personalities of journalists. I think it's really important that you have a relationship in terms of being able to ring up any time, have an element of trust with journalists, and so that's where relationships are so important when I think it comes to the role that I play. And I think that it's important for all government agencies to make sure that they do have people there that are able to develop or have existing relationships with journalists. If that's their role, if they're dealing with the media every day, the media have to have an element of trust, and you need to have an element of trust in the media.
So that's the people skills. But what are the other skills that you believe are important to be a successful operative?
I think it's really important, as I say, relationships, but also being able to talk to people is important. The other important thing is being able to analyse and predict and forecast where issues may arise, how to handle issues, whether or not we pull the trigger on going out, commenting on something publicly, or whether or not it's best to hold back. I think that experience is important, because is it going to simply add fuel to the fire by making a comment on something, or is it best just to hold back and not sort of add a little bit of kerosene? I think it's important that you have experience in that field so that you understand the nuances of media and the impact that putting out a statement or making comment might have.
So that's strategic skills. And what about technical skills, like writing skills, broadcasting skills, for example?
Yeah, I think because we do a podcast, obviously broadcasting skills are important. Writing skills are very important as well, because you need to communicate messages in a clear way, and public service talk sometimes doesn't resonate with journalists a lot of the time. So I guess my role there is to make sure that it's understandable from a journalist's point of view, because having been a journalist for so long, I understand where a journalist would simply glaze over something and think, oh, I'm not going to read any more. To make it relevant, I think, is important. I think that, you need to have, I think, a passion for the agency, which I do. I love the place. I just sort of think, well, this is this terrific place to work, and this is what I want to do. I didn't think I'd be in this position when I retired from the ABC 6 years ago. I took up a number of different jobs, and I was working, for instance, doing the media for Canberra Capitals, Australian Volleyball, Canberra United, a range of
spruiking for a restaurant in town as well.
So I was doing a range of things. I think that and I was also working part-time at ASADA. So you work out what your passion is, and I really discovered that my passion was working at Sport Integrity Australia. I love it.
But I love that it's very powerful what you just said there before around integrity and that mission of embedding integrity into the Australian sports system, because
I think
so simple.
Yep.
But it's simple. It's complicated. It's complex, but it's simple and it's powerful. And so therefore, I think that's the key, is that obviously you've then now identified the tip of the spear, and you can drive at that, which will enable you to make progress, because I can understand.
I think that
everyone can understand that.
The primary goal should be the safety of individuals playing sport. Anybody involved in sport should be safe. They should be safe from being abused. They should be safe from being racially vilified. That shouldn't happen in Australian sport. Unfortunately, it still happens. So our role is to re-emphasise the importance of dealing with it properly, making sure it doesn't happen in the first place. And that's where integrity in sport is so important. And then you've got other issues such as anti-doping, which also play an important role in Australian sport. As I mentioned earlier, education is such an important thing these days. And Lex and the education team at Sport Integrity Australia do an incredible job. A lot of face-to-face with athlete groups, sporting organisations. And what they've done is they've actually got people who used to be, or still are, sports people, going out delivering the messages in a face-to-face format, so that athletes resonate with the person delivering that message. This is somebody from our hood sort of thing. They know exactly what they're talking about. They know where we've been. They know what we're going through. And that's where I think Sport Integrity Australia has been so effective in working out how to get the message, how to get engagement going with individuals and with sporting groups.
I love the fact, well, there's a few things I love about it. Now, this podcast has a global audience, but the fact that this is an Australian invention is a great thing. And a great credit to David Sharp that he had the vision to imagine that it was much more, that it was always much more than doping, and it's now incorporated all these other things. But then there's been the agility and then the hunger to test and learn and to improve and to get better at what you're being able to do, and to be able to push forward with this and establish something that's world leading. That's great. Congratulations to David, to you, and to everybody involved in the work out there at Sports Integrity Australia. It's important, so important that you get this right. But it's inspiring actually to think that we've led the way on this.
One of the really important things they did a couple of years ago, they developed a VNR whereby athletes who haven't done a doping test before can go through that doping test by putting on goggles. They go through it in a 3D format. I don't know whether that's the best way of describing it, but you actually feel as though you're going through a doping test without actually going through a doping test, if I can say it that way. So just little things like that, you think, well, it's quite brilliant. And you develop as you go along what is important, what resonates with athletes, and it's an ever-evolving field because
I think back to back into the days of early professional rugby when I was involved, and the drug testers were the big guys with the tracksuits on, and it was quite intimidating.
And the clipboard, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, but listen, Tim, thanks for coming in. We could talk all day, and we will. We've got some things to do to catch up because there's always something to talk about. But thanks for coming in.
Thank you, David,
and for joining us here on GovComms. But there you go, audience. Once again, great example of organisational comms as much as external comms, and certainly a lot of Tim's wisdom there about dealing with the media. And again, we just keep coming back to the principles, don't we, of get out from behind your desk, go and meet people, have conversations, learn not only internally in your organisation, but now with media as well. Understand what they're doing and understand where you can fit, where you can add value, where you can have impact. So the advice is consistently coming through, and we've been broadcasting these podcasts since 2016 and the story doesn't change. So I don't think it is going to change. But listen, thanks for coming back this week once again. Very much very grateful for that. Also very grateful for a rating or a review. I know I beg each week to do so, but on your favourite podcast app, if you can give us a rating or review, it does help the program to be found. So very grateful for Tim Gavel coming in this week. I'll be back at the same time in a fortnight. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.